All right, let's go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for showing up here at 8:30. I know on the third day that's not always an easy thing to do, so I sincerely appreciate it. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get into the real stuff that you came for. If you can silence your devices, make sure that you don't have ringers and other sound effects happening in the middle. That'd be great. The other is if you have a question, we'll leave time for questions. Please use the microphones because we're recording the session. We want to be sure everyone has the benefit of your question as well as the answer that follows the question. So please use the 4 microphones, and I'll be around after the session. If you have additional questions that we don't get to, I'll be happy to answer them. And if I can't, I'll get some contact info and I'll get back to you. So quick show of hands before we get started on a couple of other things. How many of you were in Orlando last year and attended the same session that I gave? Anyone? Okay, so there's a few people. Welcome back. How many of you have an Exchange hybrid set up with Exchange 2010 and an Office 365 Wave 14 tenant, the 2010 version of Office 365? Okay. Anyone here that already has a 2013 hybrid setup? Okay, so you guys are just coming to make sure that I know what I'm talking about, right? All right, cool. So here's what we're going to talk about. If there's anything here that you expected that's not on here, I apologize, but we'll be talking about the hybrid deployment choices, and not just hybrid. We'll talk about some of the other migration options that you've got going from an on-premises Exchange environment to Exchange Online. Deployment process and tools around that. We'll talk about the hybrid mail flow. We'll talk about the configuration wizard and moving mailboxes. And I'll show a demo of the hybrid configuration wizard. I'll show you how the new mailbox migration tool works. And a quick introduction. I'm a primary technology specialist. My name is Neil Axelrod. Principal technology specialist. Sorry, I don't even know my title. I'm based out of Atlanta, Georgia, working with enterprise customers in the Southeast. So some of my customers are Coca-Cola and Home Depot, and some other large enterprises in the Southeast U.S. Been with Microsoft for 14 years, so be walking you through all this, and hopefully at the end you'll have a much better idea of what hybrid is, how to configure it, and then how you can utilize that within your environment. All right, so first let's just talk a little bit about some of the fundamentals. Hybrid's not the only way that you can get from an on-premises Exchange environment to Office 365. It's a good way if you have the business requirements and the criteria are met for you to use hybrid, but it's not the only way. So we have a few other ways. IMAP migration, which we're really not going to talk about here. We will touch on cutover and we'll touch on staged. Okay? And those are both very good solutions if they meet your requirements. And then finally, if they don't meet the requirements, or if you're coming from Exchange 2010 or 2013, for anyone who might have that already set up on-prem, a hybrid migration is the way that you would probably set things up. All right, so just a overview of what is cutover, what is staged, right, and why might you use them. So cutover is really for any organization that has fewer than 1,000 mailboxes. It's meant to be what it says. It's meant to be a cutover. It's not meant to be a coexistence. So this is for organizations that want to move quickly, move all at once. It utilizes the Outlook Anywhere protocol, and it connects to the mailbox with Outlook Anywhere and pulls the directory information from the mailbox through NSPI. So what we're really doing here is a very down and dirty copy of the mailbox using the native protocols and bringing it over to Office 365. It's a copy, okay? It's not a move. So the original source environment is not modified really in any way. Staged is pretty much the same thing. The only difference is with a staged migration, you have directory. This timing keeps apologize for that. Stage migration is where you have directory synchronization in the environment as well. So cutover is no directory synchronization because it's a flash cut. Staged, as it says, is a more staged event where you want coexistence. You need a global address list. You need directory synchronization. We still copy the data the same way through Outlook Anywhere. You have to have Outlook Anywhere published. Office 365 needs to know where to go to connect. And then users, contacts, groups are synchronized that way. So with a cutover migration, essentially you've got your environment on premises. You've got Exchange 2003 or later, with the exception of Exchange 2010. And then you would set up that migration from the Office 365 console and migrate the users in a cutover. Again, only difference with staged is you're adding directory synchronization. Where you have Active Directory, you want to use that as the provisioning location for new mailboxes. You want to have a global address list that gets synchronized, and you're going to do this migration, but in a much more, maybe slower, maybe more organized way. Maybe you have a much larger environment, and doing it all at one time is not a feasible event for you. Right, so as we said, cutover is just that. Staged allows you to take a much slower pace to have coexistence. Outlook Anywhere is that protocol that we're going to connect to, so it's got to be published. You have to have an external URL. You have to have internet connectivity. If you're only exposing the environment to your internal network, we're not going to be able to connect, and we're not going to be able to migrate any of that data. Key here is if you have Exchange 2003 or 2007, you can use these methods without adding anything to your environment. So there is no need to go back and add Exchange 2010 or add Exchange 2013. You can migrate from where you are. Okay, so hybrid, which is really what you're here for, is something that Microsoft has concentrated quite a bit on. We've spent a lot of time. We've worked quite a bit with hybrid. We're really the only solution I'm aware of that allows you to have everything on premises, everything in the cloud, or a hybrid of the two. Okay, and the same thing applies to SharePoint and Lync and some of the other applications that are part of Office 365. I'm not aware of any other cloud service that allows you to have this kind of integration between the on-premises and the cloud. So what is it? It's the Federation Trust. It's that ability for organizational federation with the Microsoft Federation Gateway, with the online service, with the on-premises organization that enables FreeBusy. It enables calendar sharing. You can do the other items that are part of that federated experience. If you're using e-discovery, message tracking, the archiving. It gives you an integrated administrative experience. You can go to the Exchange Admin Center. You can run that, and as I'll show you, you can see both the cloud and the on-premises organizations, and you can manage them both from one pane of glass. Right? So you're not having to use different tools. You can do online mailbox moves, true online mailbox moves. We don't do anything to the GUID. So when you move the mailbox from your on-premises environment through MRS, what you're getting is a mailbox move just like if you moved from one database in your own server to another database, or one server in your own organization to another server. You're getting that exact same experience, and there's no OST re-download. Okay? So if you've ever experienced the Monday morning pain of having to re-download everyone's mailbox after migration, we eliminate that completely with this kind of a move. And lastly, we preserve the secure mail flow, authenticated headers, so everyone looks and feels just like they're in the same organization. It creates a logical organization that spans both your on-premises environment and the Office 365 Exchange Online environment. And we do have, as I'll show you, some scenarios around centralized mail flow. So if you've got some kind of a DLP solution that you're running on premises, or you have other requirements for mail flow to go first through your on-premises environment and then egress back to the internet through your on-premises environment, we can handle that, and it's part of the configuration now that you can set during the hybrid configuration wizard. So what is it that you need to get hybrid? Well, if you're familiar with Office 365, as I mentioned, you can use cloud IDs, you can use federated IDs, right? For those that are not familiar, federated IDs allow you to authenticate using ADFS to your local Active Directory. That's not a requirement here, and I wanted to call that out because that gets confused. People assume hybrid means I must have federated IDs. It's not the case. It's convenient. It works very well if you have federated IDs. The management experience is a little bit more seamless too because you're not authenticating twice, but you don't require it. What you do have to have, though, is directory synchronization. So you can't get away with, not having Active Directory replicating to Office 365. We need to know what the mailbox environment looks like on-prem, and we need to know what it looks like in the cloud. So the roles that you need are your existing Exchange environment, which could be 2007 or 2010. With a 2013 hybrid, we do not support, and with 2013 in general, right, we do not support Exchange 2003 as part of that organization, right? So if I have an Exchange organization, I have Exchange 2003 in that organization, I will not be able to install Exchange 2013, okay? So we can support any mailbox coming from 2007, 2010, or 2013, and as I'll show in a little bit, for those that have 2003, don't fret, we can help you there too, just not with a 2013-based hybrid. So you've got your directory sync. You'd have to install your Exchange 2013 client access server and mailbox server roles. I apologize for this animation. Somebody really jumped the gun on that one. They do not need to be separate boxes, okay? Matter of fact, for a hybrid, the recommendation really is build them as multi-role servers, right? You may want more than one for fault tolerance, and if you're a very big organization, you may even need the performance that you get from more than one, but you don't have to build them as a separate client access server and a separate mailbox role. If you want to, that's fine, but there's no reason that you'd have to do that. Okay, so what solution might be the best for you? Well, there's a few things that you want to think about. With these different solutions, how big is your organization, right? Because as we said, cutover, you're going to be limited to 1,000 mailboxes. So if your organization's bigger than 1,000, you can take cutover right off the table. At that point, right, it becomes also a question of how long do you have to do this migration? If you are a small organization and you still need to take more than, let's say, a weekend to get a migration done, then staged may be a better solution for you. If you need the features that we talked about that hybrid enables, the secure mail flow, free busy, you want to take advantage of MRS mailbox moves, then running in a hybrid is definitely what you would want to do. And if you're coming from Exchange 2010 or 2013, hybrid is really probably a better solution for you because you're already set up for that. Okay. So just a few things to remember when you think about a cutover, right? We talked about it a few minutes ago, but publishing Outlook Anywhere, something that you really must do. If you don't do it, there's no way to migrate, right? Because what you're going to do is set up this migration batch from Office 365, and we're going to contact your on-premises environment in order to move the mailboxes. So if Outlook Anywhere is not published and we don't have a protocol stack to connect to, no way to do it. For stage deployment, again, it's the same as cutover with the addition of directory synchronization, right? So we're putting directory synchronization in there, which facilitates that longer coexistence. You can have a shared global address list. Both sides of the environment can see both sets of mailboxes. Okay, so from a deployment perspective for hybrid, right, what are some of the things that you need to do? Well, some of them are the basic Office 365 tasks. Okay, if you're familiar with Office 365, you've got to do the general tasks of signing up, registering vanity domains, deploying directory sync. You've got to install the hybrid servers. You need your client access server. You need your mailbox server. And as you'll see, if you want to use an Exchange 2010 Edge transport to help with that secure message flow, you can. It's an option. We now support it as part of the hybrid configuration wizard. It's not a requirement. And publishing the CAS, external URL, the web services, the auto-discover records, right, all of those have to be moved to the 2013 client access server. And then finally running the hybrid wizard, and I'll show that as well. So key here is if you don't have your protocols exposed to the internet and you don't have those external URLs set up, it isn't going to work. So coming from Exchange 2007 or 2010, I've got the environment set up already. My auto-discover points to my current client access server. Right? First of all, I need to prepare with the right service packs or the right roll-up. For Exchange 2010, that's Service Pack 3. 2007, it's RU10 or greater. Right? If we come out with something later, you can use the later one. You're going to install those new 2013 server roles. You're also going to install CU1 for 2013, okay, which came out in, I think, April 3rd, and it is a requirement. Things may work, but definitely you want to use CU1. Right? And then you want to make sure that you get your right certificates. You need auto-discover. You need the external URL for the web services. You got to get all the normal things done that you would do when you deploy client access servers in an environment. You want to publish those protocols, and you want to move auto-discover to the 2013 server. Right? So I've got the certificate with my auto-discover namespace on it. I'm going to go to DNS. I'm going to modify it. I'm going to change it so that it reflects the 2013 CAS. If it doesn't, it won't understand. The CAS that it will be pointing to will not understand properly the organizational federation and some of the other requirements that you need for a hybrid. Right, and then finally, we're going to run the configuration wizard, and we're going to actually set up the hybrid and do all those things around the organizational federation, around secure mail. And we'll move our mailboxes. Okay. So in a relatively nimble organization where you can do a lot of this very quickly, this isn't very time-consuming, but you need to certainly be sure that you've got all the prerequisites met for 2013 generically. Right? If I can't put 2013 in my environment, I'm not going to be able to get this going. So you need to concentrate on that on-premises side first, get all those things done, deploy it, and then run the hybrid configuration wizard. Okay. Slightly different, basically the same steps, but the only thing we're doing a little differently here is we're using a it says 2013 Edge. It should be a 2010. There is no such thing as a 2013 Edge. So a 2010 Service Pack 3 Edge Transport Server that you can set up with an Edge sync, you can have running in your environment, and we can use that as the SMTP endpoint that Exchange Online Protection uses for secure mail transport. Does everyone know what Exchange Online Protection is? It's the new FOPI. Okay? It's the SMTP gateway that is in the cloud that sits in front of Office 365 for message hygiene. It also acts as the SMTP routing engine for all the mail coming in and out of Office 365. Right. You're going to do the same thing here with certificates, except you're also going to deploy certificates for the SMTP namespace to your Edge transport. Right. If we're going to be contacting, mail.organization.com, you have to have a certificate that reflects that namespace, and I'll explain why that is. We've modified how we do our secure mail, and we've made certificates a bigger part of that. So anyone familiar with IP address configuration in the hybrid wizard will be very happy, I think. All right. And then we will publish those externally, make sure DNS knows where we are. Right? You can always validate using the connectivity analyzer if you're not familiar with that. Do a search for Exchange Connectivity Analyzer, and you will, or Remote Connectivity Analyzer, and you will find that. Finally, switching the Auto Discover namespace, and then running the hybrid wizard. So pretty much the same. The only difference here is instead of the secure mail coming from Office 365 to your CAS, it's going to your Edge transport. And you're getting one more buffer in between. Now, one thing you cannot do, and I'll touch on this again later, you cannot put a third-party relay in that conversation. We have to go from Exchange Online to Exchange on-premises. Okay? You cannot put an IronMail, IronPort, Barracuda, Brand X, anything else in that conversation. If you do, you will break the authentication. You will break the ability for us to recognize everyone as internal regardless of where they are when the mail flow happens. Okay? And then we move our mailboxes. Okay. As you probably know, Office 365 released our latest version in February based on the 2013 applications, Exchange 2013 being one of them. So an Exchange Server 2013 based hybrid, where you have 2013 on premises, is supported against a new Wave 15 Office 365 tenant. As I mentioned, you've got to have CU1. It's a requirement. Any tenants that are still running the legacy version of Office 365, if you already had a tenant and you weren't upgraded yet, you cannot use a 2013-based hybrid. You can continue to use your 2010-based hybrid if that's what you have now. You can create a new 2010-based hybrid, but you cannot use 2013-based hybrid with a Wave 14 2010-based Office 365 tenant. So if you are running that, you do have to be upgraded first. And one of the things that we will do is we will do a version check from Exchange 2013 before we run the hybrid configuration wizard. So if you've got that legacy tenant version, you will not be allowed to go through the upgrade process. And here's just a view of what that would look like. You would be asked to enter credentials. We will authenticate to your Office 365 tenant. And we'll do a get organization config, and we will see what the version is of the tenant that you have. And as long as it's 15.0 or greater, and is upgrading organization is false, we'll let that proceed. If those are any other values, we will not allow you to proceed. Okay? And the reason is we don't want you to get to an unsupported state where you'll have both technical issues as well as actual issues. So what if you have Exchange 2003? Or what if you just prefer to use 2010? Okay? We definitely recommend that unless you have Exchange 2003 and you're migrating 2003 mailboxes or there's 2003 servers in your environment, we recommend very strongly that you use Exchange 2013-based hybrid. Okay? It's not very complicated, and if anything, it's more simple using the new tools. If you do have 2003 or for some reason you just prefer to stay on 2010, you need to have Service Pack 3. Okay? You cannot run with Service Pack 2 or certainly not Service Pack 1. And we definitely recommend that you upgrade to 2013 from a hybrid server basis when your tenant is upgraded. Again, it's not required, but there's some benefits for doing it, and we think that it's worth the extra step. Okay, so what is this hybrid configuration engine, and what are the things that it is doing, right? So the first thing is when you go in, it's triggering a bunch of commandlets that are running against both the on-premises topology as well as the Office 365 topology. It's writing information to Active Directory and keeping that information there so that it can act upon both the current state, and if you're running it again, it can verify things. Okay, it's reading the desired state. This is based upon what you've entered, It's based upon the current organizational configuration. It's using remote PowerShell to connect to, again, both organizations. So it's going to ask you for credentials for both. And that's something that you're going to have to do even if you've got ADFS and Federation. Right? From a management console point of view, you can use Federation to avoid having to sign in twice. When you're running the configuration wizard, it's going to ask you for those credentials, and that's because PowerShell is making two connections. It's connecting to Office 365, and it's connecting to Exchange on-premises. It's going to go and look at the current topology. It's going to get an understanding of what you have deployed. Right? And then based on what you've typed in, based on what it finds, it's going to access both environments and do the things that need to be done. So is the organizational federation set up? Are the send-receive connectors for secure mail configured? Right? It's going to review any other items that might need to be set differently or set for the first time. And then it will make those changes for you and establish that desired state. Okay, hybrid mail flow. This is important. We've given you options in the past to have your MX record either on premises or coming to Office 365. Still the case. Some new options, though. Some new ways that we're going to configure this. So no more IP address lists. If you went through that with FOPI IPs and having to rerun configuration wizard and things like that, we've simplified things. We're now basing that SMTP conversation and the connectors on TLS certificates. Okay? And we're doing it based upon publicly trusted certificates. So self-signed certificates do not count. And in the wizard, you'll only see the publicly trusted certificates. And I think we've made it much easier. We've made it much less easy for you to get into a situation where you could have a problem. We're also not going through some of the other information that we used to ask. So if you've seen the Wave 14 version of the configuration wizard, you're going to notice there are fewer inputs for you to have to add. And we can do centralized transport. So if you have a requirement that all the mail has to go through on-premises, going in and out of the organization, we can support that, and it's technically enforced. And you don't have to do anything but check a radio button, which I'll show. And then, again, if you need Edge transport server in the environment, you can do that. All right. So from the standpoint of mail coming into your environment, right, I can have the MX resolve to any on-premises SMTP gateway. Doesn't even have to be on-premises. This can be some third party that you're currently subscribing to, and the MX record is just not pointing to Exchange Online protection. I have my Office 365 Exchange Online environment. Chris has his mailbox that's in the cloud. Message comes in, bound for Chris. It hits my gateway on-prem. It hits my Exchange environment on-prem. That's when I'm now looking at my Active Directory to figure out where Chris is, right? And I know at that point that Chris has a mailbox located in Exchange Online. I know what that route is, right? It's across those secure mail connectors that we've set up in the hybrid configuration wizard. And I'm delivering that message to Chris in the cloud. From a routing point of view, it really looks no different than if you had multiple sites in your own Exchange environment and you had send-receive connectors and you're simply routing mail from a central point of egress, ingress, to wherever the mailbox is located. Now, if I switch the MX record and point it to Exchange Online protection, things look a little bit different, but not very different. And let's say I've got David who has his on-premises mailbox there on the left, right? And a message comes in for David. So what I sometimes hear is, what if we want to offload all of that spam protection? We don't want to be managing that, right? Now we've got our subscription Office 365. We haven't moved our mailboxes yet, but we've got our hybrid and we're all ready to go. We want to move the MX record. Well, you can move it at any time. And if you do move it early, while you still have some on-prem mailboxes, this is what it would look like when the mail is delivered. It would come in, it would go to Exchange Online Protection, it would go to Exchange Online, which would know that David had his mailbox on premises. And we would simply, again, route it over those connectors using the same logic exchanges used for a while to figure out where remote mailboxes are in a different site. And so there's no magic here. You can pick to continue to have the on-premises MX, or you can move it online. Now, outbound, pretty much the same. So if Chris in the cloud decides he wants to send a message and I'm going right out through Exchange Online Protection, no real magic, okay? He sends the message, it goes through Exchange Online Protection, it goes to the internet. If David wants to do the same thing, now you could route him directly through your on-premises connector. You could have a connector locally. Or if you choose to use Exchange Online Protection because, again, you want to take advantage of the hygiene and some of the other capabilities, you can set up a connector with a star route, and you can have that message route out through Exchange Online Protection. The only real cost for any of this is bandwidth. Okay? So you've got to be able to manage that internet connection. You've got to be able to know that the capacity and the messages that you're going to be sending, is going to be within whatever those capacity limits are. A few things to remember. Everything going between the two sides, between Exchange Online and Exchange On-Premises, always encrypted, always authenticated. Okay? So nothing's ever going in the clear, and it's not an internet, even though the transport it's riding is the internet. For all intents and purposes, it looks, feels, and acts like any other connector that you would have in your environment between two Exchange sites or Active Directory sites running Exchange. Okay. As I mentioned earlier, you do not want to have a third-party gateway in the middle of that secure mail flow. If you do, things will break. We do not support it. We do not recommend it. Can't be any more strong than that. You can have the routing any way you want it, right? So in through EOP, out through your local gateway, in through the MX record on premises, out through EOP. You have full control over configuring that. Okay. The MX record doesn't, the definition of an MX record and what an MX record doesn't change. Doesn't change, right? So if you have an MX record that's pointing on premises, mail will be delivered on premises. External parties are still going to use DNS. They're still going to look up your domain. They're going to do an MX, and they're going to send the mail to wherever that MX record points. One thing that we have simplified, as I mentioned, is when you're configuring the hybrid configuration wizard, the on-premises smart host, this is where Exchange Online Protection will send mail to the on-premises side of the connector, right? So if mail flow is coming from the cloud to on-premises, the on-premises smart host is what you're going to define in the configuration wizard. Now, it can be a host name that maps to a single Exchange 2013 CAS. It can be that Exchange 2010 Edge Transport Server. It can be load balanced of any of those two, right? So it doesn't have to be one machine as long as it's one host name. And you can take that host name and balance it however you want to balance it. And as I mentioned, if you want to have on-premises mail go through the Exchange Online Protection gateway on the way out, you simply want to have a star route connector that will force that to go through Exchange Online Protection. So what if you're a regulated company, or you're a company that for any number of reasons decided that you really need to have something happen to mail, and that mail is going to come through your on-premises gateway. Or it's going to go through on-premises servers at some point. You want to make sure that you're running it through some solution for encryption, for DLP, for any number of different things. We call this centralized transport. You can configure it in the hybrid configuration wizard. And so if the MX resolves to your on-premises gateway, not a problem, just as we saw earlier, right? If the MX is switched to Exchange Online Protection, and now all the mail is going to the cloud first, what if Chris gets a message we want to make sure that that mail still goes through your on-premises environment, has whatever it's going to have happen to it, and then go back to the online environment. So what we'll do is we will still route it the same way. So that was actually the same as you saw earlier, where we just moved the MX record and David's on-prem. Okay. If we now deliver to Chris, that's what's going to happen. Okay. So the mail is going to come in. It's going to hit Exchange Online Protection where the MX record points. We're going to know that we have that secure centralized transport set up. And we're going to route back over those connectors. It's going to go to your local environment on premises, and we're going to route it back to the cloud to Chris's mailbox. Okay? And we're enforcing that. By the same token for outbound, right? Everything's going to come in and out. It's going to get routed back to your on-premises environment and back up to Exchange Online if that's where the mailbox is located. Some things to remember, right? All this is still based on the same secure mail principles. We're not modifying how this is being done. We're just including some additional switches in there to make things happen a little bit differently. Everything in and out will get routed back through the on-premises environment. So unless you have a requirement for this, unless your business needs to do this, there's no reason you would want to enable it. Okay? So we don't recommend it unless, again, you have a requirement that requires that everything goes through the on-premises environment. You don't have to have mail delivered on-prem first. You can use Exchange Online Protection and have that mail routed from Exchange Online Protection to your on-premises environment. And lastly, if anyone here is familiar, and I don't know if it's a lot, but if you had Forefront Online Protection for Exchange and you had a standalone environment that was filtering mail for an on-premises Exchange organization, and then you introduced the Office 365, you actually had two instances of Forefront Online Protection. You had a route that came through two separate instances. All that's eliminated now with Exchange Online Protection. There's one instance that would support the company no matter how you choose to route. So things have been simplified, both from an administrative as well as from a support and routing standpoint. Okay, so let's take a look. So what I have here is an Exchange 2013 organization. And I've already configured the hybrid because we don't have time here to sit and wait for everything to work. But we're going to go through and look at the same options. Right? So here's my enterprise node. As you notice here, the hybrid option. So when you configure hybrid, you're always doing it from the on-premises EAC console. Okay. If you had not previously run this, right, it would just ask you, do you want to run it for the first time? Okay. Now, if you have more than one accepted domain on premises and more than one domain mapped as an accepted domain in Exchange Online, you're going to be offered when you run this to add that domain to the organizational federation. Okay. In my case right now, if I look here, I've got two domains. I've got one that's already been run as part of the hybrid configuration wizard, and then I have another one, right, that has not, and that's this retrow15.co.uk. And I can choose to add that in and make that part of the hybrid environment. The other thing that we've done based on feedback, if you have a lot of domains, there was previously some confusion around which domain do I use for auto-discover. And when I'm running the hybrid configuration wizard, or when I'm doing organizational federation, when I'm doing FreeBusy, how do I know where I'm going to contact for auto-discover information. This option allows you to set a default auto-discover domain. Okay? So it may not be something that you care about, it may not be something important for your environment, but if you have a lot of domains and you've previously had any issues with auto-discover, this is a very easy way for you to anchor one auto-discover domain that we will always use whenever we're going to contact the on-premises environment. Okay, so I am not going to select, if I did, what would happen is, oops, because I don't have the federation configured, I'm going to be given a token to add to DNS to allow that Microsoft Federation Gateway federation to be configured. Okay? So I'm not going to take the time to add this into DNS at this point, but when you're running this for the first time, this is going to come up. You're going to have to copy and paste, and there's a click to copy to the clipboard. So you can take it, paste it into a text file or whatever you have, put it up on DNS in a text record, and when we run through the wizard, we're going to look to see that that's there, and the MFG Federation is going to validate and configure you based on that token. So I'll just go back and remove that domain. Okay. So now I'm given the options here of what do I want to do for my secure mail? Okay. Do I want to use just a client access server and a mailbox role, or do I want to use an edge transport with those other two? So very, very simple here. Unlike in the previous version where I had to go back and do some sort of hokey configuration, if I want to enable centralized transport, which is what we talked about where you can have mail go through the on-premises environment, both in and outbound, I simply check the box. Okay, so we've definitely made things much simpler, much less for you to have to do. Now it's going to ask me where I want my receive connector to be configured. Okay, so I just have to give it the server that I want to configure that on. I've already picked it. If I didn't have it picked out, I could go into the list and I can pick it. It's going to ask me where I'm going to have the send connector configured from. In Exchange 2013, receive connectors go to a client access server. Send connectors originate from a mailbox server. It's only asking me where I want those to be. Right? So I'm going to give it that information. Okay, now what it's doing is it's saying, we see you've got one publicly trusted certificate that's capable of doing TLS and attribution for this secure mail functionality. So is this the certificate that you want to use? If you had more than one, you'd see a drop-down list, and you could pick the one that you were going to use. The one thing it will not do is it will not pick self-signed certificates. Right? So it's got to be a publicly trusted certificate. And again, we can go in here and modify, right? So if I want to pick, in my case, I only have one. Okay. Now what it's asking for is a host name that maps to where is that SMTP delivery, right? Where is that going to go? What is the published FQDN that Exchange Online Protection is going to use when it sends mail to your on-premises organization? And this, again, can be a single FQDN that maps to one machine, multiple machines, load balance machines, DNS round-robin balance machines, whatever you have it set up as, but you need to publish one FQDN that Office 365 can use as the host name that it's going to send mail to. Okay. Now, regardless of whether you've got Federation configured or you don't have Federation configured, you're going to have to add your credentials. Okay. And this is my on-premises credentials. Okay, then it's going to ask you for your Office 365 Exchange Online Administrator credentials. And again, regardless of whether this is ADFS, you have to add these in again because PowerShell is going to make separate connections, and it needs to know separately which sets of credentials to use. Okay, and once it's got that information, it's going to go ahead now and process using the steps that I outlined in the hybrid configuration engine steps. It's going to look at the current state, desired state. It's going to make the changes necessary to take you to that desired state. Well, I'm not sure what's going on there. We don't have time to go through it. This is a demo environment that one of my colleagues in the UK let me use. But what would happen is it would complete through that set of steps and tell you it's completed successfully. Okay? So suspend disbelief, if you would, for a minute. And all right. A few things that we got feedback on from the previous version. I mentioned the auto-discover domain. That was a primary piece of feedback, right? There was a lot of confusion, a lot of troubleshooting around what domain is being used. So now you can set that primary domain to ensure that that's the one that we're going to contact. The other piece of feedback was if I don't have my auto-discover published correctly, or there's some other issue around DNS, around infrastructure, and I run the federation and the hybrid configuration wizard, in the previous version, if things were not configured to work, it would simply fail. Now what will happen is if we can go out and read an auto-discover record in DNS, if we know where things are, we can go and configure the environment based on what we anticipate it would be. And when you get those things fixed, like DNS pointing to the right auto-discover FQDN, or the IP changed, or the network connected, or whatever it is, you can go back and rerun it, but we'll at least have made an attempt to configure things the way they should be. And those things that are not dependent, like secure mail, we can get that all configured. Okay. Lastly, one of the things that we changed that was heartache to a lot of people was around email address policies. So while we all know that it's best practice to use the email address policies and to set up things based upon the way that Exchange does it automatically, we know a lot of folks are using maybe a different method, right? So if you've gone in and if you've edited primary addresses, and if you've done things outside of the email address policies without disabling them, in the previous version, we had instances where some folks had gotten overwritten primary addresses, right, or proxy addresses that were modified or deleted. We certainly didn't want that to be the case, so what we did is we went in and added an option. So when the update email address policy runs as part of this configuration wizard, it's going to only add secondary proxies where we think they need to be added. Okay, we're not going to delete anything, and we're not going to change anything that's already there. So if you've done something, that makes sense to you, but maybe not to the configuration engine, we're not going to touch it. Okay. Now, it's not a great state to be in, and there may be other problems that you'll encounter later on, but we're not going to make it any worse as part of the hybrid configuration deployment. Okay, management. The way you manage a hybrid environment is through the Exchange Administration Center, which is a web-based console, right? There's no more MMC. As you saw in the demo, you can see both the Office 365 and the on-premises environments together. I apologize for these slides. I don't know what happened with the timing on these. So the key is that because it's browser-based, right, I can access it anywhere as long as I'm connected. Right? And I can see a single set of notifications. Because it's a single pane of glass, I can manage both environments. And I've got the ability there to go through all of those configuration options for both the on-premises and the cloud environment. Mailbox migration. The key is now we've developed a new mailbox migration wizard that you administer from Office 365. As part of that migration wizard, right, you configure batches, and the batches pull the mail from the on-premises environment to Office 365. And so we'll go ahead and take a look at that. So here I've got my enterprise node. This is my on-premises environment. Right here, I'm going to go to my Office 365 node. I'm in my recipients container. I'm looking at migration. Okay. So I can start a new migration batch. And I'm given the option here, do I want to migrate to Exchange Online, or do I want to migrate from Exchange Online? This is important because the key concept here is that with a hybrid, you can move mailboxes back and forth. And you can do it, we hope you're not doing it constantly, but you certainly can if that's what you need to. When you do it, it's a standard mailbox move. So here I'm going to create a batch moving to Exchange Online. Okay. Now, I can use my MRS mailbox move. I've also got the option if I want to go ahead and move a 2003 or a 2007 mailbox. In this case, I don't have any 2007 mailboxes. Okay, I'm going to select a mailbox that I want to be part of this migration batch. I've got some folks here you might recognize. So we're going to move Bill G's mailbox. Okay, it's going to show me what my MRS proxy is, and what I have to do is I have to enable it. Right? One of the steps that you have to take as part of this is you have to make sure MRS proxy is enabled. You have an external URL configured for web services, and you have that host name published in DNS. Okay? Again, if we can't connect to it, we can't migrate it. So that's an important step that you have to make sure that you do. And of course, this is a European tenant, and but it will take a few minutes. We'll let that run. One thing it's going to do is it's going to ask me for a batch name. I'm going to automatically start, and I'm going to automatically complete. Now, once it completes, I'm going to get some information about that job and about that batch. Right? And as you can see here, it's been queued. Okay, and this is going to tell me how many mailboxes got moved. It's going to give me a little bit of information about who the administrator was who performed the move. It's going to tell me what the concurrent migration threshold is. Tell me whether it completed successfully. And then I can come here and get essentially the same statistics looking down at the bottom. I can view what migration endpoint I used and some of the settings that I have set up for that. So the key here is, A, you don't have to run these real time. You can schedule them. They run as batches. I can run all of my migration types from this exact same UI. So if I prefer to do staged, right, I can run staged. And when I run staged, I need to have a CSV that has the user information, password information, mailbox information, and I feed that in, and I can run my stage migration. So I'm no longer using multiple tools. I'm no longer going through multiple screens. I'm doing this from Office 365. So that's another key point is when you run this to your on-premises environment, it looks like an external connection, okay? So that can sometimes have firewall implications. That can sometimes have intrusion detection implications. And you want to be sure that you've properly vetted all of those before you start. You don't want your migration to start and then have your intrusion detection clamp down on it, cut it off, or throttle it, or do something else. Because it looks like a lot of data moving, from your environment out, which could be construed as a DOS attack if you're not looking at it with the right set of eyes. Okay. So let's see what we've got here. Okay, so we are still in the process of migrating. We'll let that run. So a few things to remember, as we said, right? You can use it for any of the migration types, okay? And that's really key, is you're going to one location. Depending upon how you want to move the mailboxes, you can use that same UI for all of them. It's the same wizard as on-premises mailbox moves. So again, we're getting much more uniformity around what the migration looks like. The alerting is going to be for all moves, and everything's integrated. So again, you're getting parity between the two environments. All right, summary. Exchange 2013 and Office 365, right, give you some different options. Hybrid, we think we've improved it. We think we took some of the rough edges and we smoothed them out. We think we've provided some more functionality that wasn't there previously. Running through that hybrid configuration wizard, if you run through the prereqs, should not be anything that should be a daunting task for an IT pro or for a consultant. Right? And the admin center is now the one-stop shop for all your administrative needs. Okay, from one pane of glass, one web browser. Right? I ran the demo on Internet Explorer. You can run it on any other browser that we support. And you no longer have to have MMCs installed or have specific management packs installed. Some other things that you may want to take a look at, the Exchange Online Archiving uses hybrid. That's where you have an on-premises mailbox and you have an archive that's located in Office 365 and Exchange Online. So some of the concepts that you just saw are very applicable to that, so just some content that you may want to look at. Some of the typical resources that you've seen, right? And one thing that I want to ask, I apologize for the timing on the slides. I gave it to someone to edit for me, and I probably should have QA'd them one more time. They uploaded them, and my fault. But if you can please fill out the evaluation. They are important. I know you've heard it a million times. That's all I'll say. So you can also win, although I don't have any control over that. If I did, I would tell you. So, yep. And these slides are available for you to download. And with that, if you have any questions.
I'm confused about the limitation that you seem to indicate about using third-party off-site organizations to process mail. We use Mimecast, and we expect to continue to use them to mitigate the 3 nines of Office 365 reliability, archiving, and that kind of thing. What am I not understanding there?
Sure. So my fault for maybe not being clear enough. You can continue to have the MX record point anywhere that you want. So if that's the third party that you're referring to, that's not a problem. Where you can't have the third party be part of that conversation is the secure mail between Exchange and Exchange Online. So when you configure the hybrid, you're giving it all the information that we just did through the hybrid configuration wizard. Your CAS server or your Edge transport server will connect directly with Exchange Online protection, and there cannot be any other relays in the middle of that conversation.
Office 365 goes down.
If Office 365 goes down, then the mail will just queue in your on-premises CAS or Edge transport until the connector's back up. Just like any exchange-to-exchange send-receive connection that you would have set up in your own environment. So what we do is we use authenticated headers, which preserve the ability for users in the cloud and users on premises, right, to share information. If you break that conversation, then the message looks like an SMTP message coming from the internet, right? And now we don't have the ability to recognize, we had David and we had the other user in the cloud. They would see each other as internet email senders versus internal email senders, okay? So typically what people do if they're concerned about a connection into their internal environment, then the Edge transport provides you with that buffer and the relay to allow you, for anyone who's not familiar, an Edge transport server does not get joined to the domain. It's a standalone host. Does that answer the question?
I need more clarification.
Okay. Sir?
Yeah. Okay. I'm a little bit unclear on the difference between a staged and a hybrid. In the
Sure.
sense that Monday morning when you come in, if it's not a cutover, you're going to have some people on-prem and some people in the cloud. So what's the difference there?
Sure. So staged is a cutover that takes longer to complete. And the difference between the hybrid and the staged is when I run a staged, Monday morning, I have to re-download my OST file, right? It looks like an inter-organizational move the way you're probably familiar with it, right? Because it is a copy. It's not a move. You don't get free busy. You don't get organizational federation that facilitates the free busy, okay? So what it really is an ability to share the global address list, to have routing that works between the two environments, and that's it. Whereas hybrid gives you the fuller features of, the federation, secure mail, the ability to do MRS mailbox moves that are truly moves. We don't change the GUID.
Mm-hmm. And I guess in the same vein, which one is faster to do, like the Outlook Anywhere type of data ingestion or the MRS type of data ingestion?
As far as data throughput during the migration, I'm not sure there's a ton of difference there. There's a white paper that outlines specifically if you're using this type of migration method, what you can expect. We do throttle in the data center. So the one thing that folks have probably noticed is that you're going to get a consistent throughput for each migration stream, but you can have multiple streams. So we don't allow you to flood one stream because it looks like a DOS attack, but we will allow you to have multiple streams at a consistent pace that we can manage. So the short answer is there's really no definitive way that I can say that one is going to be better for you, but the throughput during the migration is roughly the same.
And I have another question, but I'll wait after.
Okay.
So question about the mailbox moves. Can you use PowerShell, or do you have to do it through the UI? And can you spin up multiple threads?
Yeah, that's a good question. So everything that I showed has an equivalent PowerShell commandlet that you can use. You can do hybrid configuration from the PowerShell commandlets. Not very many people choose to do that, but you certainly could. The mailbox moves, you can continue to use move request. And you can
Even the Office 365 from on-premise? Like,
Yes.
That's not a problem?
Yep, remote PowerShell.
And then is there anything that happens, like let's say the move doesn't complete successfully, there's a network issue on the our source end or something, and you're moving, 30,000 mailboxes or whatever, what happens then?
You'll get logged information that will tell you where it failed.
Similar to like an inter-org move or something
Exactly.
like that?
It's going to look very, very similar, if not the same, to what you're used to between two mailbox servers in the same environment.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
I had a question about the licensing when you choose to use the service's online protection. So let's say I have 1,000 mailboxes on-prem and 2,000 in the service. Do I have to license the 1,000 on-prem mailboxes?
Excellent, excellent question. Yes, you do. So the way you can route mail through Exchange Online Protection, and I'll just preface by saying one of the assumptions in the scenario that I used is, let's say an organization of 10,000 mailboxes decides we're going to move to Office 365. We're going to go buy our 10,000 Office 365 subscription licenses, but it's going to take us a year to move everyone online. Okay? At that point, that Office 365 Exchange Online subscription gives you the rights to use Exchange Online Protection. If you had, let's say, 20,000 users and only 10,000 were planning to move online, so you only bought 10,000 licenses, the other 10,000 users, you can cover them through one of two different ways. One of three ways, actually. You can buy an Exchange Online Protection subscription specifically for them. They can have the Exchange Enterprise CAL, which gives them the rights to use Exchange Online Protection. Or you can buy an Office 365 subscription, which could cover them for not only that online protection, but potentially for Exchange on premises as well. And I don't want to get too deep in a licensing conversation, but there is a concept called transitive use rights where I can buy a cloud subscription, and it's going to work for me as a client access license with my on-premises users.
Thanks very much for that. It's good.
Yep. Sir?
Just had a question about connecting to, when creating a batch, connecting to your on-premise Exchange server. One thing I haven't found is clear guidelines on what's required on your on-premise Exchange server in order for that connection to be established. I've had cases where, establishes a connection with no problems, and I'm able to transfer mailboxes online, but just recently I was having problems with an Exchange 2010 server where even though it was passing every connectivity test, I still couldn't connect to it. It would say couldn't find the server. And I guess in my case, I'm just kind of looking for clear guidelines on what do you need to do on your on-premise server to make sure that you can create a successful connection using the batch migration tool.
Sure. So you're talking about the MRS moves themselves.
Yeah.
Right? Yep. So what you'd want to do, you have to have your external URL for web services and for auto-discover. They have to be published to public DNS. So if you're using split DNS, make sure they're in the public side of the DNS configuration. You've got to have all of your certificates. You've got all the basic things that you would do when you set up a client access server in your environment and publish it to the internet. So none of that should really be specific to Office 365. And all we're doing is using that auto-discover record to go and make that connection. So there really isn't anything special that you need to do beyond just following the guidelines that I mentioned, making sure that all the things that you do on-prem are correct for setting up, how do I put Exchange 2013 in an organization that has a prior version, making sure I have CU1, making sure I publish my external URL. I have MRS proxy turned on, right? One of the new things in 2013, you actually have to go in the virtual directories and you have to check the box that says MRS proxy is turned on. And if you haven't seen that or don't know what I'm talking about, and you have 2013, go into your virtual directories, you click on servers, go to virtual directories, go into your Exchange Web Services, click on that, and under that you will see an MRS proxy checkbox. If that's not checked, that could be a problem. So hope that answers the question. If it doesn't, be happy to talk to you offline. We can see if we can figure it out. Sure.
I know my organization, for various security reasons that are beyond me, we don't want to turn on Outlook Anywhere. If we don't go that route, do we connect to 365 via the internal CAS servers? Or
No.
is that off the table?
No. So any connections to Office 365 connect directly to Office 365. So if you don't want to use Outlook Anywhere, then you would have the ability, obviously, to use OWA. You could use IMAP. You know, you can use Exchange Active Sync. But there's no way for you to proxy client requests to the cloud through your local servers.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
Who was first?
This guy.
Okay.
Well, I've just got two questions real quick. During the hybrid wizard, you pointed your send and receive connectors to one particular server. What happens if that server goes offline?
Well, that's what I was talking about, where you can have multiple servers participate in that connector. So it's not just a single server. You can add multiples. So
I can do more than one. You
Yes.
just did one, for example.
Correct.
Okay, good. And second, when we move, excuse me, when we move mailboxes now, we're able to set a number for corrupted messages to allow. Do you still have that same thing when you send them online when you move them to the cloud?
Yes, and I believe this is what you're talking about.
It's under more options. You still have the option to set like 40 corrupt messages or whatever? Okay. All right, cool.
I'm not sure if that's what you're talking about there. No, it's just the concurrent threads that you
Yeah,
can
I
run.
didn't see anything there in the GUI,
Yeah.
but he said you had to do the PowerShell to set the
Yeah,
corrupted messages.
we can take it offline if you want. I'll get the answer for
Okay.
you. Yep.
So,
But you're able to set it.
am I next?
Yeah, I got a question.
So, I don't want to kind of embarrass anyone, but you know, the 3 nines of reliability seems really bad to me. What is Microsoft doing about that?
So is the question you think it should be 4 nines or 5 nines, or the question is you don't think we've met the 3 nines?
No, 3 nines is, you know, roughly 90 hours of downtime a year, and we're a law firm, and my
No,
head...
it's 10 hours, up to 10 hours of unplanned downtime.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, I apologize. So 3 nine, that still seems bad to me, you know. Anytime our email system goes down, we're a law firm, you know, my head's on the line.
Sure. So, I mean, I can certainly understand the need for availability and the need for your email to be up and running. 3 nines of unplanned downtime does equate to roughly 10 hours a year, right? It's a per month calculation. We've been operating at roughly a 4 nines pace for about the last 18 months. So we had a couple of blips just under 3 nines in November and just under 3 nines in February. Every other month we've been at or above. It's a financially backed service level agreement. So for those of you that are familiar or looking at Office 365, I think you probably know what I'm referring to. You know, and obviously if you need something greater than that, then we make great server software that you can install locally. That's the best I can tell you.
Yeah. So I have a client that has Exchange 2003, 2010 hybrid, going to the cloud. Do I have to do a double hop to get to the cloud?
Can you explain what you mean about a double hop?
Not go move the mailbox straight from 2003 to the cloud. Do I have to hop to 2010 first?
No, it's a direct move.
Because I've tried that, and Microsoft support has told me that, but every time I do it, every item is corrupted in the mailbox.
I would refer you back to support. I've worked with many customers that have gone direct. As long as you're using a 2010 based hybrid,
Right.
you should be. Now, they will be offline mailbox moves, right? They
Right.
won't be online mailbox moves. But there shouldn't be, you know, obviously there shouldn't be corruption in the messages. So must be something going on somewhere that isn't quite right.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Perhaps a silly question, but migrated user still access public folders that are back in the internal?
Yep. So the question is, how do migrated users to the cloud get access back to their public folders that are still on premises?
Yep.
There's a whole story about that if you give me your contact info, I'll try to forward some info to you. It's not published at this point.
Okay.
And I don't have all the details, so I wouldn't want to give you incorrect info. But I can get you some info at least to get you started.
Your contact info on the resources that are published?
It should be. It should be. If it's not, I'll give you a card. You can contact me.
I will come up and take your card.
Who's next?
Yeah, just a quick question. I saw a lot of examples where somebody has an on-prem Exchange system, you could move them hybrid-wise or not to the cloud. I'm wondering if you start directly with an online tenant, you don't have an on-prem presence at all for Exchange. Can you work your way back? Can you decide at one point, hold on, let's do a hybrid solution?
Sure.
Can you just deploy an on-prem and it won't be the first? It has to know that you already have
Yes.
mailboxes in the cloud.
Yep. Until you run the hybrid configuration wizard, they're two separate environments. So there's no reason that you can't do that. Typically, we see, it's not something typical, but if that was what you needed, you could certainly do that.
And your schema is already upgraded, or is it not?
Well, no. I mean, if you would need at least a minimal schema to run directory sync, but let's just take an example where you bring up an Office 365 tenant, you're using cloud IDs, you're not using directory sync, you've got a small subsidiary maybe using it, and then the corporate folks go, hey, this is great. We want to add all of our corporate users, and we've got, an AD out here. Then, yeah, you would minimally have to have the Exchange schema there for directory sync. And if you didn't have Exchange already, then whatever version of Exchange you were installing would require that you update for that schema.
Cool, thanks.
Yep.
Your slide seemed to indicate that Exchange 2013 was required. I thought that with SP3 on Exchange 2010, you could have hybrid running without 2013 at all.
Right.
Can you speak to that, if that's possible?
You must have missed my slide on Exchange 2010 hybrid.
I must have.
No problem. So yes, with Exchange 2010 SP3, you can maintain hybrid with the legacy version of Office 365, the Wave 14 version. And if you're upgraded or you have a new tenant that's Wave 15, you can use Exchange 2010 based hybrid with SP3.
Okay.
We definitely recommend that unless you're running Exchange 2003, to use the 2013 based hybrid.
Okay, and why is that? What advantages does that give you?
Well, all the things that I showed, right? So the ability to use the TLS attribution with the certificate, the ability to not have to plug in IP addresses for secure mail, the centralized transport if you need that.
That all seemed to be in the hybrid configuration wizard on SP3.
No, it's not. So, I mean, I'll just say it's your choice, but our recommendation is to use the 2013 based hybrid unless you're supporting a 2003 org.
Okay.
Or an org that has 2003 in it.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Oh, I am, okay. I'm over time, but I'll be happy to stick around outside if you guys have additional questions.